We know that 90+% of the warming in our climate system is in the ocean.
It's basically supercharging itself.
Small differences in temperature, boom.
People say, seems like everything became a hurricane this year. Well, it's not too far from the truth.
This is the fuel that we know is very, very important in hurricane strength in particular.
We are seeing a greater percentage of tropical storms around the planet reaching category 3, 4, and 5 intensity.
Remember when hurricane damage meant broken windows and some roof tiles? Those days are long gone.
Oh my God!
Getting worse than ever. It was so quick, like God had driven a spike into the ground.
Now, we're talking about entire towns underwater for weeks, and the reason isn't what you've been told by the news. There's a hidden factor that's completely rewriting the hurricane playbook, something that's jumped from causing 27% of deaths to a staggering 57% in just a decade.
Small differences in temperature, boom, big differences in the amount of water vapor that's getting put into the atmosphere. That water vapor is really the fuel of the storm.
But why? That's what we're here to uncover. And believe me, the answer is going to shock you. Remember Hurricane Otis in 2023? That storm went from a gentle breeze to a Category 5 monster in less than 24 hours. One day, forecasters are telling people to maybe bring an umbrella, and the next, they're scrambling to evacuate entire cities. And Otis isn't some freak occurrence. This is becoming the new normal, folks. Meteorologist John Morales, who has been studying this stuff for decades, he's saying that these sudden intensifications are becoming more common.
We are seeing a greater percentage of tropical storms around the planet reaching category 3, 4, and 5 intensity.
Storms like Milton are setting records left and right, not just for strength, but for taking paths that make absolutely no sense. So do you know what's really keeping these weather experts up at night? It's not just that the storms are getting stronger, it's that they're becoming wildly unpredictable.
A small chance of something horrible is good enough to make a call. These catastrophic intensities are being reached with greater ease because those rapid intensification cycles are happening with greater ease as well.
We're talking about storms that can go from a little tropical depression to a full-blown catastrophe in a matter of hours. It's barely enough time to run to the store for batteries and water, let alone prepare an entire coastline for impact. It's like trying to predict where a caffeinated squirrel is going to run next, except this squirrel can level buildings. But here's where it gets even crazier. These supercharged hurricanes aren't just messing with our ability to predict their paths and strength. They're completely changing the game when it comes to the aftermath. We used to think that once the storm passed, the danger was over. Boy, were we wrong. Get this. There's a new study out there saying that the death toll from these storms can stay above average for up to 15 years after they hit. 15 years. That's not a typo, folks. We're talking about long-term impacts that are so complex, they're giving forecasters and public safety officials nightmares.
It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific.
Think about what this means for a second. It's not just about boarding up windows and stocking up on canned goods anymore. We're talking about potential ghost towns, areas that might be uninhabitable for years after a storm. How do you even begin to prepare for something like that? But preparing for hurricanes is extremely difficult, and one of the biggest problems people fall into is believing they're safe just because the storm isn't heading directly at them.
As a meteorologist that tries to communicate life-saving information to an audience, but you're not seeing that partnership with local officials.
Experts have been sounding the alarm, but most of us are still playing a dangerous game of meteorological roulette. We think we understand the risks, but the truth is far more complex.
Once a person gathers a certain perception that they're seeing on the media, it must be going to Tampa, and they forget about the cone.
What if I told you that the way we've been thinking about hurricane preparedness is completely wrong? That the strategies we've relied on for generations are about to become as obsolete as a rotary phone? The most dangerous mistake isn't ignoring the storm. It's believing you can predict its next move, but what's really waiting just around the corner will shock even the most prepared experts. Remember the hidden factor we mentioned before, which we will reveal soon? It's rolling out the welcome mat for hurricanes in places they've never dared to show their faces before. We're talking about storms forming in the Gulf of Mexico like it's their new favorite hangout spot. But here's where it gets really wild. Those hurricanes that used to fizzle out as they moved north, they're now crashing parties in Canada, of all places. Can you imagine? And if you think that's weird, wait until you hear about what's happening in the Mediterranean. that calm blue paradise we all dream of vacationing in, it's starting to see storms that look suspiciously like baby hurricanes. It's like Mother Nature's decided to rewrite the whole hurricane playbook. Now, you might be thinking, so what? A few new places get some extra wind and rain. No big deal, right? Wrong. Here's the thing. These areas aren't built for this. Their infrastructure, their emergency plans, they're all based on the old rulebook. It's like trying to play chess with checkers pieces.
There was no warning, there was nothing. We were in bed and the next thing we were just, it was gone.
Take Hurricane Milton, for example. This bad boy didn't just form in the Gulf, it decided to break all the rules and travel from west to east. That's like a salmon deciding to swim downstream instead of up. And it didn't stop there. Milton became the 5th strongest hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic Basin, and Milton's not alone in its overachieving ways. Hurricane Leslie and Hurricane Kirk set their own records, becoming the strongest hurricanes ever recorded far east in the Atlantic and late in the season. But here's what's really keeping scientists up at night. These storms are intensifying faster than ever before.
2 days later, we were at 180 miles per hour winds. That kind of intensification is just extremely rare, if not unheard of.
We're talking about storms that go from a gentle breeze to a full-blown monster in less time than it takes to binge-watch your favorite TV series. This rapid intensification is a game changer. It means less time for warnings, less time for preparation, and less time for evacuation.
It is terrifying to see these waters rising and not knowing what to do. And there's not a way to really get out.
In areas that have never had to deal with hurricanes before, this could spell disaster. Imagine trying to evacuate a city that's never had hurricane evacuation routes or shelters. It's like trying to organize a fire drill in the middle of a fire. And all of this chaos, all of this unpredictability, all of these new dangers, they're all linked back to that hidden factor which we are about to reveal. Predicting our future is extremely difficult, and one of the biggest problems people fall into is believing they're safe just because nothing has gone wrong yet. But there's a hidden factor that no one is talking about, a factor that changes everything, and we are about to expose it. Did you know that for every single degree Celsius the ocean warms up, there's 7% more moisture hanging out in the air?
Water vapor is really the fuel of the storm. Small differences in temperature, boom, big differences in the amount of water vapor that's getting put into the atmosphere.
Now, 7% might not sound like much, but in hurricane terms, it's like giving Popeye an extra can of spinach. That's why storms are bulking up on water. This extra moisture isn't just making the storms wetter, all that water vapor in the air, it's packing heat, literally. When it condenses into raindrops, it releases energy. And what do hurricanes love more than anything? Energy. So now we've got hurricanes that are dropping more rain, spinning faster, and lasting longer. It's a triple threat that's turning what used to be big storms into city-swallowing monsters.
It seems to have become commonplace for us to talk about how many feet of rain is the hurricane going to produce, not just how many inches.
And get this, it's not just about how much rain falls, but how fast it comes down. We're talking about rain so heavy it can flood streets in minutes, not hours. And you know what's really mind-bending? All of this chaos, the stronger storms, the massive flooding, the prolonged destruction, it's all kicked off by that tiny 1 degree Celsius temperature rise. It's like the Earth turned up its thermostat just a smidge, and boom, suddenly we're in a whole new world of weather wackiness. But these storms aren't just getting wetter, they're getting weirder in ways that are catching even the experts off guard. Take Hurricane Harvey, for example. This storm hit Texas in 2017, and then just decided to stick around. It parked itself over Houston for days, dumping more than 60 inches of rain in some areas. That's 5 feet of water, people. It's like the storm looked at the city and said, you know what, I think I'll stay a while. And stay it did, turning streets into rivers and neighborhoods into lakes. But tracking these changes is extremely difficult, and one of the biggest problems we're facing is thinking we can stay one step ahead. Imagine a transformation so profound, it's turning everything we know about survival into a guessing game. The evidence is mounting, not in textbooks, but in real-world consequences that can't be ignored. What happens when our most trusted models, our most sophisticated predictions start to break down? When will the very systems we've built to protect ourselves become obsolete? And the real question brewing beneath all of this, it's not just about hurricanes anymore, it's about what comes next. This isn't just about a single degree anymore. It's about a complete system failure that's putting millions of lives at risk. Hurricane Milton wasn't just a storm. It was a brutal wake-up call exposing the catastrophic gaps in our emergency response. While we've been talking about climate change, governments have been sitting on their hands, leaving entire communities vulnerable. What happens when evacuation plans become death traps, and the very systems designed to protect us become our greatest threat? In our next investigation, we're pulling back the curtain on the shocking government failures that turned Hurricane Milton into a humanitarian disaster. Missed warnings, broken communication, evacuation routes that led nowhere. This isn't just another hurricane story. This is about the lives destroyed by institutional incompetence. Watch now and see why no one is safe when bureaucracy meets disaster.